takes place every year between November 25 and December 10. And this platform is used widely by activists all around the world who would want to call for an end to all forms of gender-based violence. We are marking the campaign here today with a discussion on changing the culture, building healthy relationships. It is my pleasure to welcome Esperanza Tilghman, Political Officer of the US Consulate General in Chennai, and Swetha Shankar, Director Client Services, Prevention of Crime and Victim Care, PCVC Foundation. Welcome, please come. A warm welcome also to our digital audience who's joining us from Kochi, led by US Government Exchange Program alumna, Ms. Sandhya Raju, who is the Director, Center for Constitutional Rights Research and Advocacy from Kochi, Kerala. Sandhya participated in a US Government Exchange Program on community approaches to social issues in the year 2007. Before we begin, just like to share a brief overview of how our morning will flow. We will begin with opening remarks by Ms. Esperanza, followed by Swetha, and then we will move to our digital audience at Kochi, who will offer comments. Sandhya will moderate that. We will come back to the American Center for closing statements, and the events will conclude with a question and answer session with our live as well as our virtual audiences. Today's event will be recorded to be shared on our social media platforms, and we encourage you to follow the US Consulate in Chennai on Facebook, Twitter, and Insta. And please do share and view the videos when we post them on YouTube. Just a small, note, we will be passing around a very, very brief survey, which will not take you more than 2 seconds to complete at the end of this program. So please take the time to fill out the survey. Over to you, Esperanza.
Thank you. Hello to everyone in Kochi, and hello to our audience here at our resource center. I wanted to welcome you and thank you so much again. It's an honor for me to speak with you. Chitra had mentioned that I'm the political officer here at the consulate, and in my various positions with the U.S. Department of State and in different consulates and embassies, I've always found an opportunity to be involved in events such as this, activities that not only mark 16 Days Against Gender-Based Violence, but I hope being part of this discussion and hearing what our guests have to say, that you are also inspired in some way to take action, to find ways in which you can promote the rights of all members in your community and in your society. So with that, I hope that we are able to have a very thought-provoking and engaging conversation. I think the topic of gender-based violence is a very sensitive one, especially viewed through our very different cultural and social lenses. And so I invite you all to think about what this topic might mean in your own space. And again, how are you able to kind of shift your understanding and help inspire and encourage others who are in your own social circle to make changes also. And the topic, as Chitra had mentioned, is changing the culture, building healthy relationships. And I wanted to first direct my question to Ms. Shankar, who's involved in all aspects of crisis and emergency services. I had the pleasure of speaking with her before we started, and how she has been able to grow up and direct her energy, and how she has approached her education and her professional aspirations towards increasing awareness of feminism, and also, you know, helping create community community-based approaches, institutional change, and her participation in a US government-sponsored exchange program to enhancing and increasing women's access to justice also. I think it's all very important, and I hope she inspires change for not just the young women in the audience, but the young men as well. We all have sisters, we all have mothers. There's a woman in all of our families, whether they're by blood or by friendship. So again, when we listen to our guests and Ms. Sandhya, you know, let's all kind of view this through our own lens. So I guess my first question for Swetha is if you can speak about the prevailing cultural norms. And what I mean by that is describe and discuss how gender is constructed in the Indian context and how this contributes to how women's bodies and sexualities are devalued in a way that has given rise to gender-based violence.
Thank you so much for having me here. I would just like to begin by taking a couple of minutes to talk to you all about the work we do at PCVC. And I think that will set some context to this conversation. PCVC stands for the International Foundation for Crime Prevention and Victim Care. And we've been working in Chennai for the past 20 years. PCVC is a service provider for domestic violence survivors and sexual violence survivors. We offer emergency intervention services as well as long-term rehabilitative services to women survivors of violence. So what that essentially means is that we're there when you call us to provide whatever support we can to ensure that there is no re-victimization and women get the support they need. Given the kind of cultural context that we operate in, there is often violence directed at women for seeking help as well from institutional and other stakeholders. So our work focuses on ensuring that women have a safe environment to make these decisions and to get the support they need to get out of a situation of violence. So we have a 24-hour hotline, and we also have an emergency shelter. We offer referral services, including legal services, mental health services, counseling, support for children, etc. It's a very interesting question about the construction of gender. When we talk about stereotypes, we all know that boys and girls are raised differently. We all understand that very instinctively, that some things are okay for us to do and some things are not, right? I remember someone telling me that in one of these sessions that we had previously, that even the way we sit, you know, very often they'll say, keep your legs together. Like, why are you sitting like that? Why are you laughing so loudly? You know, these are all very subtle but constantly reinforced things from childhood that are told that our bodies need to operate under very strict boundaries, under some sort of control, that to be viewed as acceptable, to be viewed as respectable, we need to be and act and speak and think in a certain way, right? And this leads to many consequences for women. It's really interesting because around 5 years back, when we look at the kind of statistics that our hotline had, most of the calls were from married women who are facing intimate partner violence, spousal violence, or violence from in-laws, right? But if you look at the statistics now from the last 2 years, we see that more and more young women, young people are reaching out to us because of denial of choices, right? And when we even look at the domestic violence law in India, it recognizes violence, family violence, as not just spousal or intimate partner violence, but also violence from family. It can be the marital family, or it can be the natal family, the birth family, right? The national, I have some statistics here which are quite shocking. And also not, because I think we have kind of grown to expect this, right? The National Family Health Survey states that 46% of women in Tamil Nadu will face physical or sexual violence at some point in their lifetime. The global statistic for this by the World Health Organization states that 1 in 3 women face violence, right? But in Tamil Nadu, according to the last survey, it's 46%. That is almost 1 in 2. Okay. And we all have experiences based on gender and its intersections with class, with caste, with religion, what it means to face some sort of discrimination, some sort of oppression, of denial of choices, of having to constantly police ourselves for fear of consequences. Okay. Like I was saying, the increasing number of calls we're getting from young women are mostly focused around family violence or dating violence. Right? So we're getting calls from young women who are saying that their education is being stopped or they're being forced to get married. Their choice of partner is not acceptable, that they're facing dating violence, but when it is taboo to talk about being in a relationship at all, where do you go to talk about relationship abuse? So these are all serious questions to think about, because we have an enabling environment for young women to come out and speak about the potential abuse they might face, right? Some of the calls we get on our hotlines from young women who are afraid to go seek support or tell their families, who should be our first line of defense, but often aren't, uh, about the fact that they are in a relationship that is turned abusive. This is because they fear that their education will be stopped, that their mobility will be controlled, that they are asked to maybe give up their cell phones, give up their education, married to somebody sooner than they would like, and certainly not of their choice. So the kind of unfortunate consequences that women face for seeking support itself is really problematic, because at this point, women have to fear more for the consequences to their life, to their earning capacity, to their decision-making ability, than perpetrators have to fear about consequences. So these are all things that I think we need to talk about. When we talk about culture change, it needs to begin from families. It needs to definitely be a part of conversations within our institutions. Because if our support-seeking mechanisms are themselves re-victimizing, then where do we go?
That's a really excellent point. And Sandhya, through your experience, if you can answer the same question, I know you are improving the access of justice for women. I know that within a legal framework, there is an opportunity to try to counter these effects. But how do you see the social construction possibly interfering with the way that you are trying to deliver legal services as an attorney?
Actually, what Swetha has been saying. Yeah, actually, what Swetha has been saying is very true. Can you hear me? Yeah, okay. Actually, what Swetha has been saying has been very true with respect to Kerala also. So today we have a group of a mix of academics, and we have a mix of transgender students, and these are all people who face the same things day in and day out. And Kerala is considerably more conservative than the rest of the country. So though we have a gender ratio which is favorable to women, the kind of pressures which women face is very huge. I mean, domestic violence is one of the highest, sexual violence is one of the highest. Recently, we've had a case where two children who were raped and killed. The accused were acquitted, and there's been a huge protest about that. So sexual violence is something which sexual violence and domestic violence is something which is really not really taken seriously. That is what we feel. I mean, when it comes to gender issues, even when we approach the enforcing agencies, there is a kind of reluctance to take up issues relating to women specifically, and that's where we come up. For a criminal justice system to start functioning, you need an FIR to be lodged. That FIR getting lodged itself is a big struggle, is what we find when we actually do our interventions. Yeah. So what Swetha has been saying has been is similar here also. Access to justice for women to even think or the third gender. I mean, as we say, transgenders who've been identified, who've been recognized legally also now. Even they face immense challenges. Women face challenges; they face double challenges. So that is the kind of structure we'll be living. Thank you.
Yeah, and Swetha, during our conversation earlier, you had mentioned kind of the work PCVC does to support and promote and protect the rights of transgender LGBTQ Indian youth. Can you speak more about your work in that regard?
I think Sandhya raised a really important point about the kind of non-inclusion, violence, discrimination and the many vulnerabilities that LGBTQI individuals face. At PCVC, we have been working with queer organizations in Chennai to provide shelter services specifically to queer individuals who are in need of support. So we have an inclusive shelter where we offer services to women, trans men, trans women, both heterosexual and homosexual women, of course. But here, I think what I'd like to mention is, I think first kind of fear when someone asserts their identity, either their gender identity or their sexuality, or even if they're not asserting it, but it's found out, and they're being outed by somebody else within the community or the family, is that they don't have a safe space to open. We don't have access to a lot of sensitive services. The LGBTI community, of course, has worked for many, many years to create community support services and make them available. And I know that there are a lot of organizations in Kerala as well that are working towards that. But our focus here is to work with our queer allies, to ally with queer organizations to see what we can do to be more inclusive within our organization, to ensure that we open up services. And we get, again, a lot of cases from young queer people who are either being targeted by family or their partners are being targeted by family. We get a lot of calls from the districts as well, from across Tamil Nadu, people seeking support, people who are in very high risk situations, right? That there is a threat to life, there is a huge threat of violence that they have to encounter, and traditional support mechanisms are made unavailable to them because of existing prejudices, because even though the 377 has been read down by the Supreme Court, we don't see that kind of institutional change happening overnight, which means that institutional spaces also might become sites of violence against them. So we are trying to create networks with organizations, because we've already had a shelter in existence for 20 years, to see how we can learn and relearn and be more exclusive and open up our services as well.
Thank you very much. Sandhya, regarding the legal framework, I think you touched upon it just a little bit in regards to how sexual abuse cases are being handled, or maybe not handled by local authorities. Can you describe through some of the cases that you yourself have worked on, describe what the shortcomings and challenges have been for you in properly prosecuting cases of either violence against women, gender-based violence, or violence against those in the trans and LGBT community?
Yeah, when we, there are three approaches actually. Can you hear me?
Yes.
Okay. So there are three approaches which we feel. I mean, when we deal with domestic violence, there is again when we there is this attitudinal difference when we are actually approaching the courts for getting protection orders. Now, only if there is gross physical violence or there is an FIR, the courts feel comfortable enough to file to give a protection order. If there is no visible injuries or marks, then they are waiting for something else. They're waiting to see, okay, we need we need some more proof. Let's call the other person and then let's talk. Now, if it's sexual violence, there is this again filing of FIR. But there is a if it's just molestation, there is a reluctance. If it is like rape, then because it has to be registered anyway, then the registration happens. But the thing is that the issue is there is a kind of um, a slow approach in investigating the cases. So we've had two instances of there was an instance of sexual harassment workplace. When I'm saying sexual harassment workplace, there was a case of rape. It's a domestic worker being raped in the house, and the charge sheet still has not been filed, and it's almost 6 months. We have gone to the High Court now because the charge sheet has not been filed. There was a case where again she was molested by the employer, and again it was only after we went filed we were they knew that if someone was following up that an FIR was registered, and even now for that also we had to go to the High Court for moving the case. So the thing is there is a lot of caste I would say a caste and class difference also in pushing the cases forward, because domestic workers and some people belonging to the lower economic background, they find that they feel that why should you interfere? I mean, just forget it, we'll settle the case. And that is the first instinct of the police authorities also. Why don't you settle the case? So this is the obstacle, and which just for filing an FIR when you face so much of obstacle, which is just the first instance, with the kind of challenge which you face for waiting up to trial, because that's another whole process. It's a huge thing, and the strategies most defense lawyers adopt is also to maximize the delay, because when you maximize the delay, then the victim gets psychologically beaten, and you can easily target them at that point of time to kind of compromise the case. So these are those technical challenges. So unless you have a proper legal support from the beginning, from the time she's registering an FIR till the end, where she's also getting counseling as well as legal counseling, it's a huge challenge for the victim to get justice. And that is what we feel. And as our organization, we try to give that from the beginning, so that at least those cases which come to us achieve what if we have to go to the High Court or we have to go to the courts to actually challenge something, we can do that. But there needs to be a more systematic approach towards this. Otherwise, what happens is many women will just get away from the justice system.
Sandhya, I wanted to follow up. You had mentioned the work of your law center to kind of create a better support system. And I'm wondering, how are you seeing any initiatives to promote better investigation on law enforcement, creating sensitivity in the judiciary? Are there any such initiatives happening in Kerala?
Actually, we ourselves had connected training programs with the prosecutors, with the judiciary, with the law enforcers, and we constantly carry out these awareness and training sessions with the police, with the JJ system and the police also, so that the legal, at least the legal awareness is given, the sensitization is given, it helps them, because while we are doing our training sessions, what comes out is also the fact that a lot of people do not know the latest trends in law, or the latest systems, latest changes in law, which they find it very difficult. So they still feel that we can still carry on with the older ways of investigation or older ways of interrogation, which may not really apply now. So through our information, and they say also that they don't get enough training on gender sensitization or also on the latest techniques in law. So that's one lacuna which they have. I mean, especially within the child rights system also, and even within the women. I mean, in the general police investigation.
you. And Swetha, before we open up questions from our audience, two themes that had come up from you and Sandhya, and that was how you also add caste and class and community to this very already complicated matter. And the question I want to ask is, when we're speaking in those terms, how can families operating in those communities and individuals such as ourselves, what is essential for creating or advocating for a shift in how we think about gender and violence in these community designations, I guess, for lack of a better term?
I think it's important to recognize that these intersections of identities lead to further vulnerabilities and further discrimination. So it's important for us to be first mindful as institutions, as civil society organizations. For example, what are approaches, who our staff are, how diverse we are as an organization. And I think that will also contribute to the sensitivity of our services. So at PCVC, we focus a lot on increasing the diversity and representation and leadership, occupying positions of leadership within the organization. That's one thing that I'd like to mention. And definitely, I think we need to engage on the community level as well as the institutional level. Individual level, of course, we work a lot with women survivors to ensure access to services, but to bring about attitude and mindset change is a huge job. And I think it is really essential that we engage with communities, engage with stakeholders, with organizations. Education institutions, for example, are very critical stakeholders in this process, that we have mechanisms of support for young people, queer people, women, whoever they might be, that there are mechanisms of support, sensitive support, non-victimizing, non-victim blaming that are available for women within these spheres. So it is for our workplaces, our education institutions, our civil society organizations, our institutions, law enforcement and otherwise, to work on embedding these approaches within their organizations. I mean, it's easier said than done, but I think it is really necessary for us to work within those spheres, because it might be easy. I think it will be very easy, I think, to break the cycle somewhere if we don't have that kind of 360-degree support. Do we have a multi-stakeholder system that is responding to crimes against women, crimes against queer people, that is working together? Is it a coordinated system? Are we ensuring that there is no gap in that system? So these are all things I feel that we need to start working on. And they might seem like very big things, but they start with conversations within our homes, conversations within our workplaces, within our colleges and schools, about how we're going to start changing the culture.
Well, that is a wonderful segue, because it is time for all of us now to engage in a conversation. And I want to start with our guests and audience in Kochi and just ask the question, what have you seen in your daily lives that has perpetuated the kind of discrimination and the negative perception of women and other people in the community?
Hello. I'm Lida Jacob, a former bureaucrat who worked in the field of education, social justice, etc., and also as advisor to government of Kerala on gender and women empowerment. So we have been, at least I think Kerala has been in the forefront in implementing the legislation protection of women from domestic violence. But at the same time, we find that we are sliding. We are sliding because many of the institutions, the law enforcing agencies, see this as a nuisance. And very often they try to trivialize the whole issue, not only, as Sandhya said, by the judiciary or the police who have to do the major work refuse to take such cases seriously. Also, I feel that the cultural change that we're talking about has to begin in our homes. And our homes still are a highly discriminatory situation. In Kerala particularly, where we have inherited a very bad backlog of discrimination against women. Despite all our education and our high literacy rates, we still have women working in, I mean, I know about the government sector, people working in very high situations who are still forced to hand over their entire package, salary package to their husbands. But that's a different matter. I talk about women working in larger numbers in Kerala, and the children are used, particularly boys and girls of a vulnerable age, left alone in their houses. This is something which the society and I think the local governments should take up in a big way to provide safe places for them to stay together till the parents come home or some responsible person comes over to take them home. We have so many cases of child sexual abuse where the parents are not around, or even if they are around, they are too tired to engage with their daily preoccupations of living, that they have no time to look at their children. We have a lot of families where the partner is no longer the husband, or the legally married person is no longer there, it's a stepfather or some other person living there, and the daughters and the sons are in totally vulnerable positions. So I think it starts at the home. Schools also perpetuate this discriminatory situation to a very large extent. Our girls, after the age, I think after class 4 or 5, they do not use the playgrounds as much as the boys do. Very often there is a prohibition against that. So I think we need to start the basic in our Anganwadis, where the children come, in our local kindergartens, where the children are there, and they learn that boys and girls are equal and they are partners. So I think we'll stop for here. This is a home and the school, I think we need to concentrate.
Good day, I'm Suchitra Narayan. I am a special educator and I work mainly for inclusion of persons with disabilities. While I work with persons with disabilities, I think I have a bigger issue right now in this particular topic, mainly the serials that are watched in every home in most regional languages portray violence against women as okay and acceptable. Almost every single popular serial in the regional language portray violence against women as being equal, violence against children as being okay, and that I think is what every home is watching, and every woman, every man, every child is made to feel that it is okay, because that's the popular serial. And the other thing is, and this is the situation for people with no disabilities, people who supposedly have a voice. Where is a voice for people who are discriminated further because of disabilities? I don't want to say anything more. Thank you so much.
Wants to comment from our audience here? Yes, hi. Hi. Please come over here so they can see you and they can hear you as well.
Is it okay?
Yes, this is fine.
Hi. I'm Professor Laura from the Department of Social Work, Stella Maris College. I'm happy to have my students here. They're specializing in family and child welfare, and of course my daughter who's doing a 4th year law. Well, thank you so much, first of all, for giving us this opportunity. So there are certain thoughts which are running into my head because my students are placed in the community and they work with PCVC as well. Well, I understand this is a perennial problem. And we keep talking about it when we say, yes, we have to come together, interact, start interaction, but we are starting. It's not that we have stopped interactions. We have not started at all. We have started talking about it, yet where are we lacking? Now, the biggest question which was running into my head, many things were running into my head, when one thing was, we have been normalized in understanding these violences are absolutely normal. And not just that, everything is normal according to us. Oppression is normal. Discrimination is normal. We've been raised, we've been socialized that way, number one. Number two is, like, we have a domestic violence act in place. We have legislations. India has no problems in enacting, laws or programs, policies, etc. Now, where are we failing? Are we failing in terms of implementation? Now, it's not the layman's responsibility to know about the acts when we ourselves are not aware of about the intricacies of an act. Now, when Sandhya shared with us that even filing an FIR is a problem, proceedings are an issue, then why at all do we have a law? We have an act. Why do we have an act? Because you're not supposed to. On one hand, we are normalized. On the other hand, we have an act. But when I go and complain, then my issues are not taken at all. Now, caste, class, triple discrimination, and it's 4 degrees of discrimination. All are there. Now, where am I? What is my role? I've been asking myself. Of course, we have these students. We encourage them. We change their mindset. All that is yes. But is it enough? Is that influence enough? Is another question which is running into my head. Number 2. Number 3, am I the only responsible person? Am I the only stakeholder? Now, where are my boys? Where are my men who have to be taking up the lead? That's my 3rd. 4th one is, if that is all, what happens to my fellow persons with disabilities? What happens to them? And normal people can, take discrimination and violence as normal. What happens to them when they're totally shut? So these are the questions. Now, this particular session has kindled that in me further to ask these questions to the activists who are there, and also to my own self, to how am I to go further? Because again, to handle this, I'm sure India will enact another act, another legislation. Is that what we're looking at? So those are my questions.
Did you want to respond to that?
I think I understand and share your frustration. I think is what I'd first like to say, because as people on the ground working, we do often come across these same questions. Where are we? How far have we come? Does our work have value? Is it creating impact? What is that impact? Is it creating change? Definitely all hard questions to ask ourselves. As far as the law is concerned, yes, there can be laws, but it needs to be implemented by people and organizations and institutions. And so I think we need to start with the work of changing attitudes and mindsets. It's long, hard work. It's going to take many years, but I think with students such as yours, ma'am, we do have a lot of students coming in. I think that raising of that consciousness that there is a role to play, I think is important, because we cannot get tired in this fight. We need to, I think, look at it as incremental gains, or at least that's what I tell myself, that it's one step forward, maybe 7 steps backwards, but we need to get together to provide that strength, that support, to work together and do it. Because one organization, one individual is not going to bring about that change. The person from Kochi also shared, it is and brought up, it's really important, I think, to talk about those intersections. That are we talking about persons with disabilities, and what does it mean when there is violence against them? It's for all of us to get together, I think, and create those networks to work together. And as far as the PWDVA Act is concerned as well, the implementation of the Act has several challenges. Sandhya was raising a really pertinent point when she touched upon how difficult it is to get protection orders. We have seen that ourselves. Even in cases of gross physical violence, we have found it really hard to get protection orders for women. They're called to negotiate with family members and with the spouse. They are called in for hearings for months together. In fact, we have a client who's gotten a protection order after a very severe incident of physical violence after a whole year. So these are all things to be looked at for sure. But I think I don't have any perfect answers. I think the answer is to work together and to have more of these discussions and to find solutions together.
Hi, we have a comment or a question from Kochi.
Yeah.
So it was a very interesting discussion. I am Neela Joseph. I was former professor at the Institute of Management in Government. Regarding domestic violence, our institute has conducted 45 training programs for magistrates, lawyers, police people, local body leaders, and one important aspect we left behind was religious leaders. So we were many people were talking about the cultural factors. It is utmost important, and one major driver of culture is religion. We know the Sabarimala issue, Ayodhya issue, how much passionate people are about the religious sentiments. So if I speak or somebody else speak, it is just like plain water. But if it comes to the mouth of a religious leader, so can we identify certain religious leaders who have a real influence on the people? But unfortunately, most of these people are talking anti-female issues. But if we can somehow or other work at the mindset, it will be good. Then regarding the cultural factors, according to the recent National Family Health Survey, 14+% in Kerala, the ever married women are facing domestic violence. And when you speak about the intensity of the violence, what I feel most was that even the victims say that it is okay for the husbands to beat the wife if there are sufficient reasons. And we know National Family Health Survey, and 52% of women, it seems, say that it is okay for husband to beat the wife if there is a good reason. Then another thing is we did not mention about the political interference, the political patronage. If from a particular party a person is domestic and perpetrating domestic violence or child sexual abuse, he gets all the political backing, and maybe you can even see him sitting at the head of the affairs for children and women, and also we can see him giving leading roles. Then another thing is the intersectionality, class, caste, and gender. Very true. And we can you examine the cases whether it's Disha in Kerala or the recent cases of suicides and molestation faced by the two children. They all come from very backward communities. And then people should understand it not as a private affair, but people should understand that it is a public malady. It is a public shame. And so, and again, it's not a women's alone issue. It is a social issue. Then we have to think about another form of violence is that women are not given the enough opportunities and they are not able to bloom to the full potential. For example, in Kerala, there are 54% local body leaders because of the reservation. But coming to the number of women in the assembly, it is just 6.4%. How many people from Kerala are selected to Parliament, Rajya Sabha, Lok Sabha, and the nominated members? One So the parity it is. So that also should be acknowledged as a violence, the lack of opportunities. Then we have to think about not only the direct violence, but the structural violence. Even the system of patriarchy, the system where wife has to go to the husband's place and settle. Then the cultural violence. All these three types of violence will have to be understood separately. Thank you.
If I can go back to what Professor Laura said, because I think we heard in all of our guest responses that there is no one person or institution that bears responsibility, and there needs to be men fighting alongside women in this. And I see some young men in the group in Kochi, and we've got some young men here. And you know, I want to kind of briefly describe something I shared with Swetha that happened. You know, my brother was recounting a story of one of his Indian American friends. You know, this is in the United States, and he spoke about how he had watched his friends beat their sister for having a relationship, having a boyfriend, and my brother not doing anything. And I think also, you know, we get into this issue of what can young men do to be part of the solution. And I want to ask the young men in the group, you know, what are your observations? How have you been able to try and change the perceptions of your own male peers? If any of you feel brave enough to speak, we welcome you to do so. I think this might be commentary also until young men feel brave enough to speak out against this. We're going to find that society is not going to be able to move forward. Is there a young man in Kochi who wants to speak up?
Hello. Hello, ma'am. I'm Adnan. I'm a law student at Symbiosis, Hyderabad. So basically what I think is that the men or from our generation, actually from my generation, we are evolving to a certain stage where we are learning that women and men are same and are equal. But the problem is that we are constrained in the society, ruled by our forefathers, ruled by certain laws that are put forward by our own ancestors. If you come to Kerala, or when you take India as a whole, you can see that men don't cry. Because from my childhood onwards, if I started crying, my grandma or my granddad would literally scold me and say that men won't cry. You're not supposed to cry. I mean, what? We don't have our feelings. Can't we cry? Can't we get emotional? No, we don't. That is what we have been taught. Again, this mentality is what is actually ruining the entire society. Because we can't come forward. We are supposed to be people who are cold-hearted or something. Like, we are not supposed to have our own feelings or anything. It's like we can't care. We are supposed to be the responsible one. It's okay to be responsible sometimes. Like, it's okay for men to make mistakes, but we are considered not to make any of those. These kind of mental levels or mental scores that we are supposed to maintain makes a burden or a pressure on us to allow us to create a sense of level in which we are above women, or creates that sense in the men saying that women are supposed to be dominated by men. And according to me, all we have been doing for the past 70 years of independence, we have been making acts and regulations. From Nirbhaya Act, even we heard any of big issues, we immediately make acts, we immediately make laws. But are we sure that we are following those laws, or have we made any institutions to implement those laws? That is what we are supposed to do. So I think that as long as this mentality of our society of the men does not change, there is no hope for India, for the future of India, to be honest. Thank you.
Yes, we have a comment back here. Please come to the middle of the group.
Hi, my
Hello.
name is Chinmay. I was so I am an exchange alumna myself for the Fortune State Department's Global Women's Mentoring Partnership. And I just started following your work. I was trying to figure out if there is an organization that deals with, this domestic violence. So I myself am a singer. Some of you might know me. And I was known to a lot of people because I outed a very, very politically powerful man as my molester last year. And the plays of caste, it played on me despite the fact that I belong to the traditionally oppressive caste in this country. I belong to the upper class, I belong to the upper caste, but it was still, my caste identity was still used against me to say that I'm lying. So the concept of disbelief and non-belief, so at the end of the day, I don't know how do we negotiate the caste identities, because right now, based on what is the oppressive caste which is traditionally identified versus which is the dominant caste who is in play with politics right now, that is one question. Second, what I did find with the lacuna in the past year is that even with me, it's a huge challenge to go and prove that you have been molested by somebody. This is a nature, the crime by itself as nature does not leave evidence. So I can't give any evidence that somebody grabbed my dress or they groped me, or even if there was digital rape, I can't prove it. There is no way of proving it because it does not happen with witnesses. I was wondering if there is some sort of a setup in place that can follow up and help, because from what I understand, speaking to the audience that I have and I have access to, I shared a survey, I asked girls to respond to it. And most of them are not aware that they have an ICC in place in the internal complaints committee in their colleges and their workplaces. They don't feel safe even if there's an ICC. Training programs are just a click-through form that people, it's not a training program for all employees. That is one. And there's another comment that I wanted to tell the professor with regard to people with disability filing their cases in court. Right now, there is no way for people with speech and hearing impairment to actually go and fight their cases in the court of law, because you don't have somebody who can read sign language. So not only is the legal system inaccessible to them, they also don't have lawyers who can deal with them or communicate with them and to take their problems forward. And finally, to speak to this gentleman who spoke about men being completely not being kept in the loop. So a couple of days ago, I was part of a talk early in the morning, and there was this gentleman who said there are no dowry harassment cases in India today. And he said it with such conviction. See, there is all, and the repeated question that we get, you are lying, what about false rape, what about false domestic violence, what about this, what about that? Because I think the ambit of laws is very unidirectional, and it takes care of only one or two or three problems, where there is like an entire umbrella of problems that is still not dealt with. So people are forced to take either, okay, there is a rape or there is a dowry harassment case for something that actually comes under mental and physical and financial abuse, which is not dealt with in the traditional set of laws. So do you think, the question actually is, how do, because we are constantly looking at empowering one gender, I'm talking about right now the two dominant genders. There are a lot of other non-binary aspects that we also need to be dealing with, but we are looking at, there is an othering of men right now. And they are not included in these dialogues. And if you see the representation of men in something like this is minimal, they immediately feel the need to defend. There is a lot of agitation. They come and tell us that, women are equal today, so what is your problem? So the question is, I think, to understand how do we deal with this, because each time somebody, are you aware of Deepika Bharadwaj, the men's rights activist? So each time I put out a case of, because I myself am a standing example of my case going nowhere. I have filed with the NCW because that is the only route available to me. So how do we actually have more allies? We need allies in men. We need to move away from men are trash to, hey, we need allies, because they traditionally have had power and money and social, I don't know, they are higher up in the social ladder. So how do we include men? Are there ways to include them? And the more pertinent, the more important question is, are there NGOs who can actually chase organizations to make sure that ICCs function and if sexual harassment cases can be filed? Because I see there seems to be a gap. I was, to be very honest, I was unaware that you existed until 4 days ago, which is why I came here. So is there a space for an organization that can chase these? Because most of these women, I think somebody said that the entire 1 year of it tires them out, right? And after that, they're like, okay, can I just let go and just go ahead with my life? So how do we, these are the two questions. How do we get more men into the system as allies? Because there is each one doesn't understand the other gender. And how do we get more organizations to follow through and offer support to women in institutions, educational and otherwise, with regard to lodging sexual harassment cases?
I think regarding men and boys, there are many organizations currently working who are engaging in communities to work with men and boys to construct alternative masculinities. I think an important point that the man in the audience in Kochi had shared was this construction of masculinity and what it means, right? We have a lot of construction of toxic masculinity, which tells us one aspect that we see is protectionism. A lot of men are raised with the idea that they should protect women, right? That very often translates to control women. I'm protecting you so don't go out so late. I'm protecting you so maybe you don't want to wear this. I'm protecting you so this guy is not the right guy for you, don't date him. So it very often steps into the realm of controlling somebody else, their decisions. So I think the work with men and boys is very important. There are organizations engaging in it. As far as what do we do to get more men into the, and of course working with young men, young men right from school and college is important. But I think more men can step into being allies themselves. They can take the responsibility to being part of the movement. And I think that is important as well, that are we taking some initiative? Maybe it can be as simple as stop laughing at sexist jokes when a colleague cracks it, when it doesn't feel right, but you still laugh and go along with the group. It can be anything, but just as we're looking at change from the individual and with the family, we're looking at men also to become part of this movement. The person there shared that they are also being impacted by the way they are their masculinities are constructed. So I think it is also for men that we place the onus on men to be part of these movements, to be part of these conversations, to unlearn and relearn some of the things that our culture teaches us, the kind of value we place on masculinity, a certain kind of masculinity. That's one thing. And I think the second question was around ICCs. There is a sexual harassment in the workplace law that protects women in India. There is certainly a gap in terms of constituting ICCs and conducting trainings, but more and more organizations are becoming aware of their legal responsibilities and beginning to set up these processes within. And a lot of NGOs are providing support in this process. PCVC is one of them. We help organizations set up ICCs to comply with the law, help train top management to understand what a healthy workplace culture looks like. And we also train, do workplace sexual harassment trainings for employees to understand what their role within the system is, help women file cases. We do get a lot of calls on our hotline where women are calling us to say, I would like to file a complaint, but I'm unsure, and I don't want to go to my workplace to ask these questions, so I'd like to ask you. So we do answer all of these queries and handhold women who would like to file these complaints, ask these questions of their workplaces. One small thing that women who are going to enter the workforce can do, young women who are finishing college, is ask organizations who are interviewing you whether they have ICCs, whether they comply with the sexual harassment law. These are all small things that we can keep in mind when we go into an interview, and we certainly have a right to ask. And depending on the response, we know if this is an organization that we want to be a part of or not. But these are all things that we can do at the individual level as well. But if you would like me to connect you to any organizations that do this, I would be happy to.
Yes. However, just one addendum to that. If a student who's trying to get a job ends up asking a potential employer, do you have an ICC in place? Most of the girls are not going to be doing that because of the power structure. So instead, is it possible that we can actually tell the colleges who organize these campus interviews, get them to ask these people if they have ICC in place?
Yeah, it's a
Because
great
the
point.
power structure just doesn't work. We as a culture are expected to respect elders and not ask these questions. So
Yeah,
there
it's
are
well
multiple
taken,
things
yeah.
that
I think definitely, I think there needs to be a mass kind of response to things like this. Can we make it a part of a process? So the onus is certainly not on individual people, but it's a point well taken. Yeah.
Did we have any comments or responses to that in Kochi? On ICC's accessibility to lawyers and representation for people with disabilities. I know we raised that. Sandhya, did you want to add something additional?
Yeah, I just wanted to say that the implementation of the Sexual Harassment Workplace Act is very tardy actually. But then you can actually, the collector is supposed to be responsible to ensure that all companies have ICCs. And there needs to be a local committee at all districts. Now, what again, like how we have tried to do is like we have tried to file a petition in the High Court asking for monitoring of all these, all these committees and ensuring that all places have committees. So because of that, the collectors have actually started taking up some steps to
ensure that we have implementation, we have ICCs at least in the companies or the local committees are set up, but awareness as such, how to do it, as Swetha was saying, the people are not very happy to have ICCs within their companies because that will bring out issues, and if it brings out issues, then they will have to deal with it. So that is a crucial issue which we feel is still there. Many of the committees that we are asked to be part of as external members, they start off itself saying that, we don't have sexual harassment issues in our company, but because it is the statutory norm, we need to form it. That attitude has to change, because what needs to come out is that ICC is an integral part of the company, and any woman who faces sexual harassment is free to come and talk to us. That should be the attitude. So that kind of attitudinal change needs to come within the institutions, both government, non-governmental, and corporate sector. That needs to be pushed, and that is very important, because whenever we talk about it's like sexual violence, all violence against women related issues, sexual violence, domestic violence, they are all very deeply personal issues, and for women to come out and speak out about it is difficult. It's very easy to say that the law is in place, you can easily go file an FIR, you can easily come out and speak about it, but that doesn't happen because there's a lot of stigma and lot of societal judgmental issues which are linked to it, and because of that, they need that extra hand to come out and actually speak out. And when there is an obstacle in just speaking out, then they'd rather not go into that obstacle. Plus, also another factor which I feel is that support from, even if it's like within the companies, if suppose the companies or any in the office working atmosphere, if women face harassment, the thing is that the people around do not support her, even if they know that she has faced violence, because they're afraid of their job and afraid of their job security, and that is a big impediment in women approaching the system, because if they do not get even supporters to justify what she's going through, then the entire system becomes a farce, because many of these women who actually dare to file an ICC complaint are eventually have to leave their jobs, which again is totally becomes meaningless. So they'd rather leave the job before going into an inquiry, rather than leaving the job after an inquiry. So that kind of thing is also a big impediment in women actually taking forward issues related to sexual harassment. That's something, though the committee was instituted, the committee was formed or was visualized to help women approach this system easily. It actually does not really help her really, because she's not confident.
For providing with that background, and thanks for giving some insight into some of the shortcomings of that. We have time for one more comment, and we'll go to our colleague in Kochi. Yes.
An NGO, maybe an NGO can take up ICC as its first area. Maybe concentrate 1 year or so for that team, and then organize all the ICC leaders, chairpersons and third-party members, NGO member, and then conduct seminars and discussions. And also they can meet on a continuous basis and discuss the issues. It would be good. That is what I think. Maybe they can even conduct a survey regarding the condition.
Thank you for everyone in Kochi for your insight and sharing your opinions and perspectives. I want to thank everyone in this audience for sharing your comments and thoughts. I think first and foremost, I think through your questions and through the stories that you shared, there is some courage and bravery that you needed to harness to be able to share that. I want to thank our former bureaucrats and government representatives for speaking honestly and frankly, and for showing that there is still work that needs to be done. The topic, of course, is very serious. I think it provoked us to think. I think in some aspects it was very uncomfortable. But if we take a look around and we look at Swetha and we look at Sandhya, take a look at our colleagues, take a look at Professor Laura, I think we are surrounded by people who are very aware and sensitive of what needs to be done. I think they are in positions to help inspire change. I know India comes with a long history of societal institutions and cultural norms that are difficult to break down. But as we've kind of reiterated here, it's conversations, it's working within the legal framework, it's working with NGOs, it's being around our friends and our families and finding ways to, opportunities to promote change. And I want to encourage you all to find 3 takeaways from this discussion. Just 3 takeaways of what you've learned and what you can take with you. And I wanted to just have a parting message as I was preparing for this. I saw a quote that maybe many of you are familiar with already from Dr. Ambedkar. And what he said was, I measure the progress of a community by the progress with which women have achieved. And when you leave today, ask yourself, what can I do? How can I help improve the community? And how can I move forward the achievements that women can create? And with that, I want to call our director for some final parting words, please.
Thank you, Esperanza. Thank you, Swetha. But I would also like to thank Dr. Sandhya Raju, who is hosting host of August audience from Kochi, from Center for Constitutional Rights and Legal Research. We are grateful for you for having joined this today's discussion. I hope you had a lot of takeaways from this. Would also like to thank Dr. Laura from WCC, from Stella Maris, and also I'd like to thank Dr. Lillian from Stella Maris. And
Lillian is from WCC.
From Lillian Jasper from the principal of WCC. I would also like to thank the principal of MCC for giving all of you the space and time to come and be part of today's engaging talk with Swetha and Esperanza. And I would also like to thank for Chinmay for her presence here, and also other August members representing the different sections of society here in Chennai. As parting word, I think my colleagues are sharing a kind of a small brief questionnaire, which you can just fill it up. It's a small questionnaire where we would like to take as a takeaway from today's program, what your thoughts on today's program. I'd also like to share with you, the American Center, really wants to connect with you through various programs, in the months ahead. Anytime you want to, come and make use of the resources and services of the American Center, you're most welcome to do. So long as you're going to be students of one of these educational institutions, you can always walk in with your ID card. You can always come in anytime between 9:30 to 5, Monday through Friday. We have a few librarians who will be happy to assist you when it comes to any your requirements pertaining to either your academic research or otherwise. Will be happy to assist you. Apart from that, if any of you are interested in membership is just 400 rupees. But as students of our educational institutions in Chennai, we'll be happy to offer you 50% discount. So you're most welcome to make use of this opportunity. We provide access to, apart from the print collection, which is very limited in terms of books and journals, which runs to close to 15,000. Apart from that, we provide access to several scores of databases through which you will be able to access more than 16,000 journals. So anytime you want to expand your horizon of sources of information, you can always think about the American Center you're most welcome to come and be in touch with us. We'll be happy to respond. And also to the audience in Kochi, at any point in time you're organizing a conference or a workshop, if any of you are participating, looking for resources beyond what's available there in your campus, you can always be in touch with the American Center, which is part of the US Consulate. We'll be happy to support your requirements. With that short note, I would like to thank my colleagues Chitra and my other colleagues from the library and also my colleagues from the digital team for enabling us to connect with each and every one of you. Thank you all. And there's for audience here, now we look forward to have a small refreshments outside which are waiting. Thank you.
Goodbye, Kochi colleagues. Thank you, Sandhya.
For helping, thank you for partnering with us.